The sermon that you're about to hear is from Pastor Paul Borman at Hope Lutheran Church, located in Tigard, Oregon. For more information and for more content, go to hopeintigard.com.
There are events that happen in our lives that have the power to change the direction of our lives. I'm thinking about the events that happen in your life where you look back on that day and you think to yourself, my life will never be the same again. Like, start off with an easy one. I think I was in 5th grade when the iPhone came out. And even in 5th grade, and even in that moment, I knew that this was a big deal. Like, all of the information on the internet at your fingertips. One of my classmates was cool enough and he had an iPhone right when it came out. I knew that, we now have maps in our pockets. You guys remember MapQuest? Having to print out all the directions, and if you miss a turn, you are in trouble. Now you got to get out your Rand McNally atlas to figure out where you're going. I think about the advent of the iPhone. I think about COVID, where you can look back on one day. I remember it was March 17th. There was one day that changed the whole trajectory of at least a couple years, and now there are still a lot of lasting impacts that came out of COVID. Think about things that happen in personal life, like the day that you get married, or the day that you have kids. You look at these events where you look back on that one day and you think, my life has never been the same and never will be. I'm going to make a big claim, and maybe you can guess where I'm going with this. There never has been, and there never will be, an event that has more power to change your life than Easter Sunday. Even though it was 2,000 years ago, there never has been, there never will be an event that has more power to change your life than that first Easter Sunday. That day when God's Son, Jesus, did what no one else could do. He lived perfectly, he died innocently, and then he walked out of the grave 3 days later. That's where this sermon series is going. Today, and for the next few weeks, we are going to be looking at the accounts of Jesus' followers in the days and the weeks and the months after Jesus rose from the dead, to see how that one event changed everything for them and how it changes everything for us. So today, the first thing that we're going to see how the resurrection changes this for us is we're going to see that the resurrection changes everything for our hope. And if you've been around Hope for a while, you know that we are a kind of a note-taking church. And so if you'd like to take notes inside your bulletin, this is your first one. Because Jesus lives, real hope is ours, even in the midst of pain and sadness. This is what the resurrection changed our hope to be, that because he lives, we can have real hope even in the midst of pain and sadness. And I'll tell you that this week as I was studying this text, this really came home to me. That even on a day like Easter Sunday, like how perfect was it last week? Just the perfect weather. And the flowers on the cross were so beautiful. And we got to hear the kids sing, and I got to see my little boys. They were dressed up in matching shirts. I really appreciated that. My heart was filled to see so many families worshiping together. The music was bright and beautiful, and the food upstairs was awesome. It was just so perfect and joyful. But even in the midst of the joy, maybe this was you, maybe this is you, there is still a lot of pain and sadness that was part of your reality. I think that this is a good thing for a pastor to say from the pulpit every once in a while. Because I wonder if sometimes the thought about church is that church is like where you're supposed to go to be joyful. And church is where you're supposed to go so that you can have all this hope and joy. And I've heard people say, like, Pastor, I'm not coming to church today. I just don't have it in me. I'm not feeling it. And this sermon is not meant to address that completely, but here's what I want to say about that. That is reality. Our whole Lenten sermon series talked about that, the effects that sin has on our lives, that we live in a life where financial struggles are a thing and health struggles are real. And there is the grind of daily work, and there is the daily work of parenting, and there are relational struggles all over the place. This is the reality, even on Easter Sunday. And the reason that I was thinking about this a lot this week is because that was the reality in our text for today. That there were people on Easter Sunday morning who had heard all of the good news, but were still downcast. I notice this every year more and more, that in all of the Easter accounts, nobody showed up at the tomb and started singing Easter hymns. There was nobody who looked into the empty grave of Jesus and started rejoicing. That for all of those first moments of Easter Sunday, it was all confusion, and it was all disappointment, and it was all sadness. And so what I'm really excited to share with you this morning is that we are going to get to see how Jesus brought joy into those moments of very real disappointment and pain and sadness. Enough introduction? You guys ready to get into this? Okay. Let's get into our text. Luke chapter 24. We are going to drop into an Easter account, drop into a conversation that Jesus had with two of his followers. They weren't two of the 12 disciples, but they were his followers, his disciples. And they were walking probably home to a town called Emmaus. This is printed in your bulletin. Now that same day, and that's the day of the resurrection, the same day, two of them were going to the village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking to each other about everything that had happened. And of course they were. Imagine you see all this stuff and you just have to go get coffee with your friend and talk about what you just saw. I can imagine them talking about this. What just happened? 7 days ago, everybody was so pumped to see Jesus. They were putting palm branches on the road, and then 5 days later, they were screaming for his crucifixion. What happened? And did you hear about this? Did you hear about what a weenie Pontius Pilate was? He gave right in to the Jewish leaders. And what about Barabbas? This guy's a murderer. He's back on the streets. Did you hear Jesus' voice when he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken?" Did you see it too? That it got dark at noon? Did you feel the earthquake? Did you hear about how the temple curtain got torn in two? There's just so much to talk about. Talking about this on their 7-mile walk to Emmaus, verse 15. As they walked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. Now, I'm not going to make a big preaching point about this, that they were kept from recognizing him, because Luke doesn't tell us why. What we do get to see is that because they were kept from recognizing him, we get to see some comforting truths, which I'm going to share with you in a moment. But we'll keep reading here. Jesus asked them, "What are you discussing as you walk along the road?" They stood still, and their faces were downcast. You get this picture in your head. Jesus joins them, and he asks them a simple question. What are you guys talking about? And that simple question stops them in their tracks and causes them to look at their feet. Their faces are downcast. And it's Easter Sunday. These are people who had seen everything, and a couple verses later, you see that they have heard. They have heard that the women saw that the tomb was empty. They had heard that the angel said that he's not here, he has risen. They had heard that Peter and John had already come back from the tomb and verified everything. But still, their faces are downcast. Now, here's something I want to share with you, and it's actually encouragement and comfort that I want to share with you. There's a famous Christian painting called The Road to Emmaus. You can look it up on your phone. I wouldn't even be super offended if you did that right now. It's this beautiful painting of these gorgeous trees, and there's a lovely path going down the middle, and there are two disciples, and then one that's clearly Jesus, and he's got his arms out behind them like this. You get this mental picture of what this was like. The two disciples were walking along talking about what all this means, and their faces were downcast because Jesus was dead, and yet, where was Jesus? He is standing right beside them. And even though their eyes were stopped from seeing him, it doesn't change the fact that he was right there. And I want to bring this comfort to you that even though you might not be able to see him, especially when you're hurting, it doesn't mean that God isn't right there with you. This is your next sermon note. Jesus walks with us in pain and disappointment, even when we can't see him. He's with us even when we can't see him. And here's the thing about this. I feel like this is a really simple thing for me to share. And I think that everyone in the room has heard this before, that Jesus is with you. God is with you. It's a simple thing to share. It's a hard thing to take comfort from. Because here's what I know about pain and sadness. Pain and sadness are constricting. When we are in the middle of pain, when we're in the middle of suffering, it's like having blinders on. Where, imagine you sprain your ankle or you break your leg and you have this sharp pain. It's almost like you have tunnel vision, where the only thing that you can think about is getting to the hospital to alleviate the pain. It's the only thing you can think about, right? When you break your leg, you're not noticing, what a beautiful view. You're just not noticing those things, even though they might be true, because the pain, it constricts. Right? That's true of physical pain. It's true of emotional pain, right? When we're despairing, when we're hurting, it's really hard for us to notice anything else going on around us. When we're in relational pain too, we can't think about other relationships because this one is in pain. When we are in pain, what tends to happen is we are blinded to the fact that Jesus is right there with us. The disciples on the road to Emmaus, they were stopped from seeing Jesus, but here's what's really cool. Is that we have the whole Bible open to us, and we know that as Jesus was rising up into heaven, remember what he said? He said, "Surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." And so I want to give you this encouragement that if you are in a moment of pain, if you are in a moment of suffering or sadness, I know that what suffering and sadness does is it constricts our vision so that we can focus on alleviating it. Do not let it stop you from seeing that Jesus is by your side. Let's keep reading. One of them, named Cleopas, asked Jesus, "Are you the only one in visiting Jerusalem who does not know these things that have happened there in those days?" He gets sarcastic with Jesus, and Jesus plays along. "What things?" Jesus asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel." So these two men, they revealed to Jesus why their faces were downcast. Did you catch it? 3 words. We had hoped. We had hoped. We had hopes that Jesus was going to be the one who would redeem Israel, but now our hopes are past tense. Now our hopes are shattered. And if you have experience with hopes being shattered, you know that hurts. I got to give you some backstory into what their hopes were. That these followers of Jesus and most of the Jewish people had very specific hopes about the Messiah. They had heard everything that the prophets had said about the Messiah, but they had misinterpreted them. They had heard that the Messiah would be a redeemer, and so they figured he is going to redeem us and deliver us from the Romans. He's going to be a great military conqueror who's going to drive out the Romans, and they had heard the prophets say he is going to sit on his father David's throne, and they thought that was literal. He's going to sit on Jerusalem's throne. He's going to restore Israel's glory. They had very specific hopes that he would conquer the Romans, and what they had seen was exactly the opposite. He had been conquered by the Romans. And so their hopes were shattered. Now, I'm going to get direct about this, and this is going to be hard and heavy, and I'm going to do this because I love you and I want you to have such high hopes. Do you know what causes so much of our spiritual pain? We have so much spiritual pain because we have placed so much hope in things that cannot carry our hope. Right? When we put our hopes into people, or when we put our hopes into things that we hope will make our lives better and then our lives get worse, that hurts. And it's not the sharp pain of a broken bone. It is the low, simmering, aching pain that we can't even really put a name to, and it just frustrates us and it hurts us and it wants to drag us deeper into a despair. You know, when you have hope, this new relationship, this is going to be the person who makes me happy. Or when you have hopes that this is going to be the medicine that finally gets rid of all of my illnesses, or when you say this is going to be the job that's finally going to give me security and stability and peace, but then the breakup comes. And then the medication comes with a whole new set of side effects. And then the job, yes, you get a paycheck, but it comes with all different kinds of stresses throughout every moment of your day. And those high hopes, the things that the hope was put in, cannot carry the weight. And that hurts. And what so easily happens is that pulls us down to a point where we want to stop hoping. I had hoped that I would get into that school, but I guess I'm just not smart enough. I had hoped that I'd be married, but I guess I'm just not likable or lovable. I had hoped that I would have kids, but I guess there's just something wrong with me. I had hoped that my career would be further along, but I guess I'm just not that good of a worker. I had hoped that I'd be able to retire early, look at the decisions that I've made. I had hoped that the world would be a better place, and look where it is. Here's the thing about misplaced hopes. This is your next sermon note. I didn't have a fill in the blank here because I just wanted to have it so we can see it. When we put our hope in what we want God to do, we miss the hope of what God has already done in Jesus. And that's very clearly true with the two disciples who were here, right? The reason why their faces were downcast, they revealed this to Jesus, is because they had a very clear expectation of what they wanted him to do, and he did not deliver on their hopes. And so we got to keep reading here. We had hoped that he would be the one to redeem Israel, and what is more, it's the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but they didn't find his body. They came and told us what they saw, or that they saw angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they didn't see Jesus. So this bit of information is really important to get the timeline right. These men are walking to Emmaus after they had heard the news that the stone had been rolled away. and that the tomb was empty. And they are wondering what had happened after they had heard that angels said that he's alive. And like, there's a part of me that still blows my mind. Like, angels don't show up every day. And angels don't show up to tell you that Jesus is alive every day. I feel like this would have caused these two disciples to at least stick around in Jerusalem and figure out what's going on. But I don't know, maybe they had work the next day, or their families were expecting them home, and they were on their way home. And they were downcast, even though they had heard all of these things. What we know is this. And this is what we got to learn too. They had become so fixated on what they had hoped God would do for them that they were missing what God had done for them. I'm going to say this in a couple different ways. They had put their hopes so securely in what they thought was good for them that they were blinded to the best thing that God could possibly do for them in Christ Jesus. Right? This is the hardest truth about misplaced hopes. Two things about them. One, misplaced hopes disappoint us. They cannot carry the weight. But worse than hopes disappointing us, misplaced hopes blind us. They blind us to the greatest things that God has promised to do for us in Christ Jesus. And Jesus, he sees this as a really big problem, so we're going to keep reading. And we see that Jesus did not go easy on the disciples. He chastises them. He said, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets had spoken. Didn't the Messiah have to suffer these things and enter his glory?" And then what Jesus did, I wish I was there for this. He gave the best Bible study that the world has ever seen. What he did is beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. So what Jesus did in this Bible study is he showed how everything that had been written was about him. Everything that had been written was pointing people forward to see this is why the Messiah came. And by doing that, he was ripping away their old hopes, which hurts, but he was giving them a much better hope as he explained to them why Jesus had come, why he had come, and why he hadn't come. He did not come to conquer the Romans. He did not come to give us a utopia where everything is perfect for us. He came to conquer sin. He came to deliver us. Not just from all of our things, he came to deliver us from death. And of course, here's the wonder of God, that by delivering us from sin and death, he has, in fact, delivered us from pain. Even though pain is a real fact for us here as we live on this earth, he has delivered us from that pain. And he has delivered us from loneliness, and he has delivered us from insecurity, and he has delivered us from hopelessness. Because he lives, Jesus has changed our hope forever. This is your last sermon note here. Because he lives, you get to have hope no matter what. It's like I was saying during the service. Most hope in the world is based in optimism. I hope that things will get better. I hope that if I work hard enough, I will be in a better place. I hope. Maybe you've lived enough life to know that those hopes rarely pan out in the exact way we want them to. But here's the truth of Easter. Because Jesus lives, we have an unshakable, certain hope that's not based in future optimism, but that is based in past fact. Jesus has already risen from the dead. And that means that there is no one who can steal our certain future of eternal life with Jesus. Our hope is secure. We have real hope for when life gets really real. It's a hope that cannot be shaken. It's a hope that cannot be shattered. And it's a hope that you can rely on every moment of your life. Amen.